I think money and fatherhood is intricately connected. We're wired as men to achieve. The size of my bank account determines, basically how my worth in terms of as an individual, as a man.
Let me ask you a question. When you think about money as a dad, do you feel confident or do you feel pressure? For so many of us, money is one of the biggest stressors in family life. It's not just about paying bills, it's about creating stability, shaping opportunities for our kids, and passing on values that will guide them along long after we're gone. So, today we're going to be talking about one of the most important challenges that dads have, money. And I'm joined by I, I don't know if he's a money expert. Is he a money expert?
Uh, I would not describe myself as a money expert. I do have some experience, and I have read a fair amount and talked with some people about how to be successful with money, but I'm not a money expert in any way. We're Solon, Dad Central.
Drew, in our conversation with dads, how often does money come up?
Uh, I'd say the topic itself doesn't come up, but we hear about money, whether it's money problems, whether it's bills, whether it's the whole family court system and the expenses involved with the family breakdown, or barriers to why you can't be involved or can't get additional resources. I think it's pretty ever present, underlying, but maybe not explicit.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So we're going to cover three things today. We're going to talk about money and fatherhood. We're going to talk about practical strategies for dads, and then mindset and communication. So let's kick it off with money and fatherhood, the connection, Drew. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, the traditional provider role, it has literally been the main thing. Like, you provide the resources, the money for the family to eat, to have a roof over their heads, to have clothes on their back, and to do anything else that would be part of it. So the connection, I think, it's kind of woven into the historical DNA, I say, of fatherhood. Um, and it's woven into the cultural sort of societal fabric, I would say. So I think that you can't really separate the two. I think there's another element, though, like, this is maybe more from a men's perspective, or even just a philosophical. Like, I mean, I think we're wired as men to achieve, or to as you like to say, score goals and get wins. And so, an element of that is money. I think there's also elements of ego involved, where it's like, uh, and I don't necessarily think this is the healthiest, and we're going to talk about mindset, is where it's like, well, the size of my bank account determines, basically how my worth in terms of as an individual, as a man, or I have to at least give the impression that I have money. Otherwise, people aren't going to respect me and they're not going to value me. And so I think that there's a whole lot involved in this. And obviously, we're just going to be scratching the surface, but I think money and fatherhood is intricately connected, maybe complicated, complicatedly connected as well.
Yeah, to add on to that, we have to realize as dads, fathers, meal co-givers, that our financial habits are going to shape our children's attitudes about money. And when I
Just
was
like
being
the
raised,
financial
my
habits
dad,
of our fathers have probably shaped our
yeah,
thoughts
oh
or
yeah,
behaviors
oh
about money.
yeah. I was just gonna go there. My dad was very much tight with money to the point where this is a funny story. He would have in the rooms in the house, beside light switch, reminder, turn off the light switch before you leave the room. Down to that stuff.
Hmm.
I don't know if you had that sort of experience, but it was just I look back at it going, wow. It's just really interesting. So that was Now the challenge was he never taught us about money, but he also so he was a saver, but he never taught us about it.
Right. And I think it's funny you say that. Robert Kiyosaki's best-selling book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the contrast there between his father, the professor, versus his friend's father, the business owner, and the interesting elements that were learned in that story. You know, I think that just reinforces the point about how financial habits shape our children's attitudes about money.
100.
I also think, and we're going to get into it, our mindset and how we talk about money, or not talk about money, really does have an effect on our children and what their thoughts and habits are about money. Because you hear a lot, and these are from some either financial experts or people who have, experienced, uh, some significant financial breakthroughs, in that they realize it was more about their relationship with money that made, and how they made some significant changes there that made a difference in terms of their ability to actually earn and achieve some financial levels that they previously never even considered or thought possible. But it all started, I think, with that mindset. But so common struggles that we may face as dads are things like our mindset, or the habits that we've picked up from our families. We could face actual things like we've just made poor decisions. We have maybe taken some significant risks, and those risks have backfired. Which have resulted in some significant debts. Maybe we just haven't had the financial foundation to build a reasonable budget, which is you telling your money where to go instead of wondering where your money went, right? And of course, the aforementioned this pressure: I've got to provide. I've got to be the person who earns the most and provides the basics for my family. Those are some, I think, real challenges we all face as dads.
Yeah, you're really saying that huge, and no, it's not getting any cheaper to live these days, and it just yeah, it's yeah, say the obvious, Ed, but I have to put it out there, and it's just really challenging to really make every cent count.
But I think from a positive perspective, it's very possible, very doable. And we see those who are successful when it comes to their financial game, or the money that they're able um, to earn and accumulate. So let's talk about some of those things. Let's talk about some practical strategies that dads
Yep,
can
no
apply
problem. Let's go
to
for it. No
create
problem.
hope and positivity, and the outcomes that hopefully they're looking for. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Well, one of the foundational and one of the easiest is having a budget. And you had mentioned a previous episode that you have a spreadsheet for your schedule. Making a spreadsheet for your expenses, or even if you want to go old school, have a book and write it down. But it's
Well,
all
Ed, come on, man. We got to be honest with our this day and age. We know there's apps for everything, and there's
yes,
some
but
great
you
apps.
gotta
So
accept
a
people
lot
where
of
they're at,
people,
man.
the apps or the technology can be great integrations and time savers, especially now with AI, some of the automation. Because the reality is it can be overwhelming. I mean, yes, old school with the book and whatever. Like I'm kind of all for that, but at the same time, where you can simplify, especially when you're a busy dad, and use the tools that are available to you, I think that's also important. So I'm just adding to what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, fully accept. I suggested that start where you're most comfortable, but just start, because there's a cathartic when you put down what you're spending everything on and you take a look and go, oh wow, it's not in your head anymore, it's staring at you, whether it's on a monitor, it's on one of these screens, or whatever, and you actually get to see, because uh the old axiom, it takes a long time to make it, it doesn't take a long time to spend it. It goes out quicker than the time it takes to earn it. So I agree. Whatever is comfortable with you, whether apps, there's a lot of different apps out there that are making making it easier, and again, saves your time. Want to get your time back, especially when you're in the world of dadhood these days. Time is the most valuable thing that you have. uh Drew, what do you have to say about aligning money decisions with family values?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? So if your values are things like health or adventure or exploration, your focus may not be to accumulate a lot of monetary things. It might be focusing on, we really want to create more experiences. So your budget might be for, we're going to create an annual trip where we go on an exotic excuse me, we go on an annual trip to an exotic destination, and we make that our focus. So you dedicate your financial resources accordingly. That's just one small example, and I think it makes sense. You and your partner are aligned. Some families would shift their focus to say our focus is being debt free. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, his celebration of the debt free scream. So they say, what, our goal is that we want to basically make sure that we provide our needs, but we're actually putting money, pouring into becoming debt free. We're paying off our mortgage in 15, 10 years. We're not, we're buying used cars, where we're using the furniture that we have or can sort of get secondhand, because we don't need to, you know, keep up with the Joneses, because as Dave Ramsey says, live like no one else so that later you can live like no one else. And so, whatever your family values are, I think you should try and make sure that you are aligning your money decisions with those values to ensure that you are moving towards, again, intentionally, the goals and priorities that are in your family. Yeah.
Fully
Ed.
agree. Onto that, just modeling healthy money behavior for your kids. Teach them about the value of money. You know, transparency. I know there's still parents that do the whole allowance bit for doing chores. Anytime you get a chance to teach about finances and monies from your own, especially if it's from your own perspective, from your own experience. And again, I'm sure there's many online resources out there that can help you with this in regards to financial education for our young kids. Can never go wrong with that. Really, really important. But also telling them things to avoid, or we've got to avoid as dads, parents, male caregivers: overspending, financial secrecy, long-term, ignoring long-term planning. Uh, I'm going to throw it out there. I always periodically will ask the dad, do you have life insurance? And that's a whole other conversation. I'm just going to leave that there. But that's one of the great wealth things that you can do, not only for yourself, but for your family. Anything else we want to add on to that, Drew, before we move on to our final section?
Yeah, I think I want to remind us that the idea of modeling behavior is really important, because the old adage, much more is caught than taught, I think really applies. And our kids see more than we realize. And something that we may take for granted, just in terms of you know the we don't think anything of, may leave an indelible mark on them. As well as, back to this idea of mindset. you know our mindset comes through in our words, in our attitudes, in obviously our behaviors. And so, you want to really be mindful of, what is your mindset. Are you coming from a place of scarcity? Oh, we can't afford this, it's always too tight, like that doesn't fit in our budget, you got to make sure you turn the light off. Like, I mean, not that those are bad things, it's just that, what is that message conveying to your child about money? And so this is where I think we should maybe transition and talk about our last segment, which is the mindset and our communication. And what I just described was this idea of much more pressure or scarcity. Like, there's only so much to go around. Like, we don't have enough is essentially the underlying message there. And so you always have to be sort of safeguarding and almost like hoarding it, right? As opposed to a sense of, what we have this, and how do we steward this well, is one option. Like, we're stewards of this resource, and how do we steward it well? How do we make good decisions that provide, or give us something that's very rewarding for us. And so, or you shift that, it's more of this abundance mindset. Hey, we've earned this and we're going to earn more and we've got opportunities. So let's focus on how do we maximize the use of this effectively while knowing that we can always earn or create more value. And that's the one thing we haven't touched on this, but Scott Donnell, when we had him on the show, he's got a great book and he does a lot of education around this whole financial piece. And I love the idea of his book is called Value Creation Kids, and it's about helping our children understand that when you learn to create value in this world, you then get value returned to you. And so it's about building this approach of how can I create value, how can I steward value, and how can I pass on and contribute value. That to me is a much healthier mindset as opposed to this idea of scarcity and limitation and sort of supply and demand, like some of the old elements. And not an economist, and don't go into any of those things. So if I said something factually incorrect, please give that. That's why I said I'm not an expert. But I think the healthy mindset, I think, is really, really important. Ed.
Good stuff. Yeah. You know, I want to just also add to that, encouraging financial conversations, open financial conversations with partners, and age appropriate talks with your kids. And don't feel shame when you're talking about it. Again, there's a lot of things out there that can help you, from financial advisors, online tools, peer support. There's a lot of resources out there. So do not approach it with shame. There is a lot of help out there. So as we wind up today's conversation about fatherhood and money, we talked about money and fatherhood, the connection. We talked about practical strategies, and then we ended up with mindset and communication. Any final things you want to close up with, Drew?
Yeah, I'll just share a short story, and hopefully I don't divulge too much sensitive information here. But after our twins are born, when I was, with my ex-wife, uh, I felt like we just we weren't on the same page, and I felt like we weren't making sound financial decisions. And I accept full responsibility as the part of my role, but I also had a partner there, and too. And as I said, she was trying to build a brand new business. I was trying to grow my career, and I found that money created conflict, conversations about how to manage money, what to do, and so I'm going to share this story that I found Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover, and we began reading it together. And so it wasn't me saying we needed to do something. It was Dave Ramsey, this third party expert who had great insight, great testimonials, and great foundational principles that we could both not argue our points, but we could say, hey, that makes sense to us. And we can see how it can help us be effective. And then I actually went about following the baby steps. Number one, you got to tell your money where to go as opposed to wondering where it went by having a budget. Okay. Number two, then you got to get the debt snowball. All right. And that for me is where I sat down and I looked at where are the areas that we have debt, plotted it out on the spreadsheet. What was the amounts? What was the minimum payments? And then began. And quite frankly, it was not pretty when I looked at it and I was like, whoa, we can't continue like this. And that also helped, right? You need to, as you said, put it down on paper. So I just want to share the story because when you do this stuff and when you find help and get the experts, the people who know what to do, and you begin following what they do, it makes a difference. Less than 2 years later, 2.5 years later, all the debt was gone. And it was a significant amount of debt, but because we had a plan and we followed the plan and got on the same page to work together to execute the plan, that it made all the difference. And so I just want dads to know that no matter where you're at, you can make progress. You just need to start today and find the resources, find the help to be able to move in the right direction.
Thanks for sharing that story, Drew. Appreciate it. And I have a feeling that it will stick with one person and they will start to take that one small step. It all starts with one step. So before we close it out today, I want to encourage listeners or people watching us to take that one small action toward financial confidence. What's one small thing you can do? And I'll put it with this question. What one financial habit do you want to model for your children this year? What's one thing you want to model? So as we close up, as always, you are watching or listening to Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And we are partnered with and proudly partner with Dove Men Plus Care, because Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man. And because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. As always, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch or listen to us. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace, and we'll see you soon.